Welcome back to Marketing Smarts. I'm Carrie O'Shea Gorgon, your host, and this is the interview series for Marketing Profs. I'm talking today with Ryan Stewart about cannabis marketing. Ryan is the founder of the agency Webris. How are you, Ryan?
I'm fantastic, Carrie. Thanks for having me.
How did you become involved in cannabis marketing? Was it like a passion project to begin with, or did your
No,
clients
well,
bring it to you?
so I will say that I am a cannabis user myself. So just being that, I've always been open to, and also just seeing how the market has exploded, obviously because of legalization, and commercialization, all that stuff. I have a friend who moved to LA probably about 3 years ago and opened up his own cannabis brand. It's actually incredible. They're doing very well now. But he ended up introducing me to somebody who needed help with SEO. It was a woman who had a singular cannabis product, actually based out of Boston. And the cannabis product is a machine called a decarboxylation machine. So for context, what that means is when you smoke cannabis, when you actually apply the heat to it, it activates the THC in the cannabis, which allows you to feel the euphoric high feeling. If you just try and eat cannabis on its own, you're just going to get sick because the THC isn't activated. The THC is the element in it that, acts as medicine, acts as a drug, what have you. So she developed a machine for medicinal patients with cancer who couldn't smoke, because obviously smoking, if you have cancer, is not good for you.
Frowned upon, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So her machine, what it did is basically you just take the raw cannabis, you put it in, you push a button, and 2 hours later, it's activated. It's a certain heating mechanism that allows the THC to be activated within the cannabis. And then after that, then you can take it and you can, put it in food, you can put it in oil, you can put it in tinctures. There's a whole bunch of applications for cannabis, especially now that I think it's being viewed on as less of a drug and more as a medicine for a lot of folks, that it's really a wide open field. So her product, she was having a lot of trouble getting online visibility because a lot of cannabis companies are blacklisted from advertising.
So tell me about that, like
Yeah.
even where it's legal, to varying degrees.
Yeah, well, I mean, the internet is kind of a global thing, so they don't necessarily abide by state boundaries. You cannot advertise directly on Google to sell cannabis. You can't advertise on Facebook. It's very difficult to even build a YouTube channel organically around cannabis content. You have to be very careful. There's certain gray areas that we can explore more that you have to understand how to maneuver, which is what I ultimately had to help them do, but also just increase overall organic. So the good thing is that Google Organic, obviously, you can post whatever you want. You get it to the rank as long as it's not about hate or violence or anything like that. So organic search for cannabis is probably the main channel for a lot of companies for revenue. So they hired me to help with that. My background is mainly in SEO, but then we also had to develop an advertising and strategy within Google and Facebook to help them just pile on more bottom funnel conversions.
So how does that work? So the advertising restrictions on
Mhm.
cannabis, how do you work within them?
So again, it's a gray area. It's frowned upon, I guess, is what you'd call it. But basically, what you have to do, and this is 2 years ago. Right now, they brought advertising in house, so we're only working with them for SEO and content marketing at this point. But 2 years ago, when we were working with them, basically, what you have to do is you have to number one. So if your Facebook page and Instagram profile is about cannabis, right, which you can't get around, you pretty much got to create a separate profile. So if you take a step back and you look at, again, they're not selling the actual drug or product of cannabis. They're selling a product that helps with cannabis consumption and from a medicinal point of view as well. So what we did is we created a Facebook page that was called Ardent Herbal. They're called Ardent Cannabis. That's the name of the brand. We created a page called Ardent Herbal, which basically we were just kind of posting pictures and blog content from a separate blog that I'll talk about in a second. That was basically just talking about holistic medicine. Because again, depending on who you are and how you view this topic, cannabis, in my opinion anyways, is medicine for a lot of folks. So, again, like different usages for tinctures and oils for body aches, for pains, for stress, for anxiety, for all sorts of different things. So we're just building some content naturally on a blog, again, on a separate domain that was tied to this page. What that does is it kind of lets Facebook's algorithm kind of turn a cheek to it and not view it as a cannabis page, right? As long as you're not posting smoking and an actual leaf, then you're okay. So after you have that up and running, you basically got to set up another ad account that, again, is not tied to that brand, but tied to that page. And then from there, just running very high level, kind of, again, letting the Facebook algorithm understand what your page is about, understand what your audience is, just running blog posts that are, again, talking more about holistic medicine and not about cannabis usage. After that, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering, so it's sounding actually, you're talking to end users, but really it's a B2B brand in a sense.
They're B2B and B2C. They actually hired me to go more B2B. So sorry, more B2C, because when cannabis was first decriminalized and made, I guess, legal for medicinal patients, they were selling all B2B. They're selling to dispensaries. They're selling to, building relationships with doctors. And they were also wholesaling their product to dispensaries so they could decarboxylate at their dispensaries. And they were doing great with that. They had a great sales model. She's a tremendous entrepreneur. She's an attorney. She's an advocate for cannabis. She's a cancer survivor herself. So she had like a very good foothold in the community. But what she wanted, she had a vision for this product to take it to the broader cannabis market. People like myself who use it recreationally, smoke every now and again, for just like you drink a glass of wine. She wanted to put this product basically in the home of every everyday cannabis user. So essentially going from a B2B model to a much larger B2C market.
Then you were just about to talk about how you were continuing to work around. So you're building
Yes.
content around holistic medicine, not specifically saying
Mm-hmm.
marijuana, not putting cannabis anywhere near it. So go ahead and continue into
Yeah.
that
So
topic.
for example, an example piece of content could be like 5 holistic ways to reduce stress, to reduce anxiety, and just like a standard listicle article that you'd see on like a BuzzFeed type thing. And one of those would just be, THC cannabis. So just kind of like, again, feeding that into there. So we're making sure to tie the content back to the brand in some way. So it's not just talking about something that has no relevance to the brand. So what we were doing was just boosting that organically. And if you're good with Facebook ads, you can get very cheap clicks. We're talking about like 10 cents or less, to basically, again, kind of build the authority of the website with Facebook algorithm to understand who the audience is, who might be interested in this content, and also just build a remarketing list. And then after that, what we do is we'd start remarketing a conversion-based advertisement that would push people for a PDF opt-in, like an ebook about decarboxylation. So it was basically
What's
saying like,
decarboxylation?
sorry, decarboxylation is so the machine that I said, and I'll follow up with some content so people can take a look at it themselves. The machine that they were selling ran the process of decarboxylation, which is activating the THC. And again, stop me
Okay.
because I'm so close to this topic now; it's like second nature to me. But decarboxylation is actually a scientific process that just essentially means the heating of
Gotcha.
cannabis to activate the THC. Right?
Toasting your pot. Gotcha.
Exactly. It's actually exactly what it is. So like, for example, when people make edibles or something like that, or again, like tinctures or oils or stuff like that, they basically put it into a conventional oven, but it wastes a lot of the cannabis because of the heating mechanism. So she built a machine that literally looks like a mason jar, a metal mason jar.
Okay.
And it activates the cannabis evenly and distributes the heat properly.
Okay.
She
So now
patented that.
oh,
Good.
smart. So now
Yeah.
you're needing people really to opt in so that you can have a way to communicate with them that's not
Exactly.
subject to all the
Exactly. So after we kind of build the audience just through content and just distributing that content, we then remarket for conversions to get people off Facebook. And then once you have their email, then you can start to market to them directly in terms of the product. And still, though, what you have to do, because you don't want to just generate emails about people who are interested in holistic health, you have to be a little bit more specific. But you have to be creative with your copy, because again, you can't necessarily say cannabis decarboxylation. You can't say like
You
stop
shouldn't
wasting.
say that anyway.
um, so you have to be creative with your copy. So um, exchanging words like weed with material, for example. You know what I'm saying? So instead of saying weed, you say material. So just exchanging copy like that, both in the advertisement and on the landing page. But the good thing about Facebook is that over time, as you build up more equity with your ads, like if you're running a lot of traffic on Facebook and you're running clean ads, you're not getting ads shut down, Facebook will give you a lot of leeway. So once you kind of build up that equity, that's why it's important to promote those blog posts, spending money basically to get the algorithm to understand, again, who your audience is, what your page is about. And if you look at it from the point of view too of generally speaking, most holistic people in terms of holistic medicine, people who are open-minded to different alternative forms of medicine are definitely open to seeing cannabis as a form of like pain relief, as opposed to taking like an aspirin or, something even worse that a doctor would prescribe. So basically just kind of using the content, the algorithm to go find people that are in market, just very, very broad. So you do have to spend quite a bit of money just to do that audience building. But after that, then you can remarket with much more specific messaging. And then again, once you have that conversion point, you can just blast them with emails for whatever you want.
Now you're talking about Facebook, and I definitely think that's a better choice than LinkedIn for
Mhm.
something like that. But I mean, what are your other options like that you're using to get
AdWords.
people aware kind of
Yeah,
your
AdWords is another one because there are quite a bit of people searching for. So people who are users, and I'm a recreational user. I wouldn't say that I'm a user. I'd say more that I'm an advocate for folks that, again, I've had some history with cancer in my family, and it definitely helps for a lot of people. I've had a very open mind, and I'm familiar with the cannabis industry, but I still didn't know what decarboxylation was. But a lot of folks do know what it is, and there's a lot of people searching for decarboxylation. So this will kind of transition, I guess, into the SEO and just kind of Google strategy that we did for them.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure how familiar people are with SEO, but they had a kind of a brand new website. And when you don't do a lot of SEO for your website, you don't have a lot of equity with Google.
So you don't
It's
have a lot of authority and you don't have,
exactly.
yeah.
It was really tough for them to get visibility. So she had this really, really good guide on how to decarboxylate cannabis. But there were a lot of major websites like Leafly, who's basically like the Huffington Post of cannabis, for like, you know what I'm saying, like a big publisher
Okay.
about cannabis. They had like the top 3 spots, and they were all just like decarboxylation guides. So we took a 2-prong approach. Number one is we started doing a lot of just kind of like PR style outreach using her name because she's a cannabis advocate. She's just a force. She's just a really solid entrepreneur. So we did a lot of PR style outreach to get her featured on like the Forbes, Huffington Post, Inc., stuff like that to build the overall authority of the website, which over time helped quite a bit in terms of getting the other content on the website more visibility. But then we actually reached out directly to the Leaflies and just offered to sponsor their articles about decarboxylation. So we basically sent them an email and said, hey, you've got this really good article about decarb. Can we sponsor it? And we did. So basically they gave us the author byline on it. So it became like a guest post submission by her with her face on it. And they also gave us banner ads on that. So we were basically jacking the search traffic from that until we were able to end up ranking that article for decarboxylation, which they rank for now.
So cannabis marketing is surprisingly serious. You would think it was all a lot of fun and games, but it is
Yeah,
not.
I mean, yeah, it's one of those industries where, how do I say this nicely? It's kind of a gold rush. There's a lot of people who have gotten into it over the past couple of years because they're like, oh, weed is legal now. Like I can make a lot of money, but it's a really expensive industry to get into, like insanely expensive industry because of all the regulations. So marketing is kind of taking a back seat. So while there's a lot of attention on it, there's not really a lot of companies who necessarily know what they're doing. And I don't mean that as an insult to anyone listening to this. So yeah, we had to take a pretty surgical approach in order to get them the visibility again and still working around these kind of blacklisted areas because we couldn't just go to Google search. We couldn't figure out a way to get around Google search. Like if you, this is back then, but we could not get AdWords. We couldn't pay for the keyword decarboxylation. So we didn't have a choice but to figure out the organic play to get the visibility for that keyword. And then the same thing on YouTube too. Like if we were to go back and do it over now, I would definitely try and figure out a way to get YouTube ads to work. In my opinion, YouTube ads are just the most effective way to advertise in the world right now by far. And because there's so much traffic on YouTube for cannabis, for decarboxylation, just based on the keyword searches that we did, that was another approach that we wanted to push. But while we were going through this with them, YouTube kept on taking down their videos and actually shut down one of their channels, which was unfortunate. Again, even though they weren't sitting there like smoking bongs, they were talking about like the science behind decarb. They were talking about the medicine behind, how THC can help folks, especially those who really need it. So they're more of like an advocacy channel than anything, but YouTube didn't care. They were taking them down left and right. So it was tough. So we had to, the opportunities that we were able to create, we had to take full advantage of them.
Tell me a little bit more about the PR style outreach you did. Like there are cannabis influencers, just like there's every other kind of influencer. So how do you
Yeah.
identify them and how do you cultivate a relationship with them?
So we use so our agency, my partner, I should say, is he's basically an automation expert, SQL and Python, and he built us like a custom crawler that we could identify influencers with. I've used a couple of influencer platforms, but I find that they're either just the middleman that take a cut on whatever the influencer wants, or their inventory is so spammed out because all marketers are using it and hitting up the same people, and those accounts suck. So what we did is we built our own crawler to scrape Instagram and YouTube.
So you want to surface people that other people aren't finding.
Exactly. And also too, because as a lot of people know, and this is a couple of years ago, it's even worse now. We actually don't do influencer marketing anymore. I just think it's not worth it. But basically 2 years ago, which is a long time ago in the grand scheme of these things, Even then, there were influencers who just wanted too much. So there's a surprising number of people who have like 1 million+ followers who are literally, I kid you not, just doing bong rips on Instagram and getting like tens of millions of views. So we
Their
were
stuff
reaching,
doesn't get taken down.
but Instagram doesn't care. I mean, Instagram's out of control, especially now. So basically we just built a crawler. We were crawling profiles, and then we have a small offshore team in the Philippines who was just qualifying those and just kind of hitting them with different tags in terms of followers. Sending them a DM, just asking if they'd be interested in, potentially working with a cannabis company. We basically put together like a one sheet for them that like talked about what the product did, talked about the company, talked about the founder. So they knew that we were legitimate. We weren't just like this industry is riddled with people. Again, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but just riddled with people who don't necessarily know what they're doing when it comes to marketing. So we didn't want to waste people's time. We also wanted to make the most out of our time because we were getting paid for our time. So we were just hitting people up on Instagram with just a very basic pitch that said something like, hey, so-and-so, like, we love your profile. My name is Ryan. I represent a company called Ardent. We're looking to partner up with amazing influencers like yourself. We have this awesome product. If you're interested, we can send you a free product in exchange for like a video of you using it, like an unboxing video. If they had content doing unboxing on their stuff. If not, then we would just offer them money straight up for it. So basically what we're doing too is we're trying to leverage anyone, not just the Instagram and YouTube side of things, but also if they had a blog attached to it, then we would also just make sure that they did a blog post review that would link back to the site as well.
See, I would think that'd be more valuable where you're trying to build organic stuff because you can't really get to it, the traditional advertising, channels.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you hire my agency now, we don't necessarily do influencer outreach anymore because, again, the amount of work and the amount of cost that it takes to work with an influencer. Mm-hmm. But back then when we were more of kind of a whole, my agency right now only does SEO. We won't do Facebook ads for anymore. So we just focus on SEO. So back then we were doing more holistic kind of end-to-end marketing. So we were looking at it just, we're killing two birds with one stone. We're going to get you the brand exposure, also some direct sales coming from Instagram. But then also we're going to have the long-term impact of getting a blog post on their website and having that link value for SEO.
So how has that changed? So you mentioned 2 years. 2 years, you're not doing influencer now. Do you still have the same challenges you faced when you first went into this 2 years ago, or for this client anyway? Or is it easier now?
It's easier now because we know what we're up against. The first time is always the hardest when you're doing something in a new industry. So it's easier now because, again, I've also learned a lot as a business owner. It's really hard to run. It's really hard to run an agency that does everything well. So we've really doubled down and tripled down on our strength, which is SEO, and really focusing on that core process of SEO, specifically when it comes to certain verticals. And now after going through and working with a cannabis company in that industry, we know exactly what we're up against. So we've now over time, after doing outreach for this company, other cannabis companies, we've got a database full of influencers and bloggers that we can just basically send an email to if we want a link, if we want some exposure, things along that nature. But we're not going through the advertising for cannabis.
No. So what would you do if you're starting right now today with, say, like a B2B cannabis type product that you need to market to dispensaries? And
I would say earmark at least 2.5, 3 months of your time to figure out, like, you have to advertise to get exposure. If you want to turn around sales quickly. Organic just takes too long, and I sell SEO, but or if you have no authority, if you're just getting started, it's just going to take too long. So I would say figure out, I do think influencer are still a viable option if you've got the budget to spend and if you're managing it very closely. We didn't have that close of a handle on, again, because we were mainly focused on the link side of things, not the sales side of things. But right. If you need to turn around capital quick, the good thing about cannabis influencers is that a lot of them are not getting hit up like a fitness or a fashion influencer would from like a Fashion Nova brand who's offering them like 10 grand per post. Again, if most people are just sitting there taking bong rips, there's not a lot of companies who want to be associated with that. But if you are in the cannabis space and if you feel like their audience identifies with yours, then you can definitely get some cheap attention off that. And it's still effective. So I would say look into influencers. I would say figure out how you can leverage social media advertising, because again, between YouTube and Facebook ads, I still think that it's the best bet for any business in the world in terms of generating sales quickly. Figure that out. Figure out how you can navigate the platform. Figure out how you can get an account that you can baseline and forecast off of. Again, that's not going to be getting shut down every week. So focus first on audience building, content quality, understanding what, and I can't tell you this because it's different for every ad account. But like I tell everyone, like good marketing takes time, it takes testing, it takes patience, and you're going to have to burn some capital to get there. But once you've got that figured out, it's just like investing in your product for the first couple of months, what have you. But like once you get that figured out, then you can start to grow and scale.
What lessons have you taken from the cannabis marketing industry, that kind of space, that and applied to B2B generally? Like what's helped you do better with B2B based on your experience in cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I've always done, I would call like the advertising method that we put together for them, like a funnel, right? Like run top funnel traffic, remarket mid funnel conversion point, and then at the bottom also remarketing more of like your sales, like talk to a sales representative type thing. So it's a model that I've been using for like the last 5 years with incredible impact for all of my companies. But going through it with the cannabis industry, since it's so hard and you have to pay so much more attention to it, like after going through that and refining it, whereas before I had a much more kind of like, yeah, let's just run blog posts to interested folks and then let's just remarket off of that, like really going through this and understanding how to build content. And I think content is always the variable, especially now, content and creative, especially with advertising. Like you have to be building content that your audience cares about. You have to. And you have to test that. You have to advertise it. You have to look at the data. You have to understand what people are clicking on, what people are engaging with, how long they're spending on the website, how willing they are then after they see that content to opt in off the back of that. Because with cannabis, you're spending so much more money because of all the things that you have to get around that you have to hyper focus on these things. So really understanding even more so how to leverage the data, how to optimize all parts of the funnel, how to really get things dialed in. And then again, also just understanding that you don't get that many opportunities, and the opportunities that you do get in such a crowded space, you've got to make the best of it. And you have to it's just not an option. It's not an option to not make it work. You have to make it work.
You mentioned YouTube. Do you think that podcasting or doing video blogs, is that a really beneficial channel for cannabis marketers to use?
Yeah, I think it's any business, any business I think it is. I just think, again, if you're going to start a podcast now, you really the first thing I asked you when we got on is who's the audience, and you answered right away. Like you have to have your audience dialed in. I make that mistake. I have a podcast and it sucks because I'm basically using my podcast as the back end. I do a lot of video marketing on YouTube and I'm just kind of pushing everything in the podcast and nobody listens to it because I don't have an audience dialed in. I'll be the first to admit it.
Well, I mean, it evolves. So I've been doing marketing smarts for like 7 years and it definitely evolves. You'll see certain segments, swell and contract, and certain episodes attract different types of people. So you got to be careful how far, afield you go from the topic you said you were going to talk about. So,
Absolutely.
right. So marketing, like cannabis marketing is still marketing. We're good. But if I was just going to talk about cannabis just generally, that I couldn't do that.
I think you could, but again, it's just like every business. You just really have to understand like who the audience is within your audience. Like it's not enough to just get on and start talking about cannabis. Like you've got to have, and I'm not saying that right away. I think the first thing that everyone should do is just start, like take the first step, start. And you can, like you said, you get it dialed in over time.
It depends who you want too. Like if you're, say, I'm a lawyer, I don't practice now, but I used to. So if I wanted to be like a cannabis lawyer, then it would make a lot of sense for me to talk about cannabis. Actually, it's easier to do a podcast about cannabis than it is to talk about law, because law is regulated also in a different way that's a little bit harder to do content around. So
very true. Yeah, I just think just to close that off, anything that you can do, and like everything will help if you do it the right way. And it's not going to be right the first time. It's just, again, just like the advertising, it takes time to get it dialed in.
Are there any challenges with marketing something like cannabis? Like, do you get hate mail from people, or, people, like parent groups objecting to you or anything?
I fortunately, those didn't go to me. We were just a marketing agency.
They didn't go to me.
Yeah. I didn't see them.
Like, have somebody else to get out there, get that stuff.
But so Weber's is our agency, but we also have an SEO agency training platform called the Blueprint Training, and we run a lot of traffic, a lot of advertising traffic. So I get quite a bit of people who comment, who DM me, you just don't care. You have to not care. I don't care what somebody says. Like, I just don't care. If you don't know me, then like your opinion doesn't faze me. And I think everyone has to take that approach. And it's unfortunate. Especially now, I've actually seen an increase because of COVID. I feel like people are just cooped up. They're pissed off. They're looking for a fight to pick. And it's easy to fall into that trap. Like it's happened to me before where somebody hits me on the wrong day with just something really nasty. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm going to go in on you. But
Mm-hmm.
like, it's always helpful. Take a step back, go get a glass of water and be like, who cares? Like it's whatever. So yes, I'm sure that they got them. I get them all the time, but it is what it is.
What would surprise people about B2B marketing in the cannabis space?
I don't know. I mean, I guess just the things that I covered in terms of the regulations, but it's hard. But all marketing is hard. I've never actually worked in anything in terms of marketing, especially now. Um,
What surprised me is how similar it is in a lot of ways. It's like you have obstacles to overcome that maybe are unique, but the way that you overcome them is not all that different from how a different, more traditional business would have to do.
Agreed. I think good marketing is good marketing. Like every campaign that we approach, we follow a very similar strategy and process that all revolves around some form of content and creative. Because ultimately, if you want to attract people who have no idea what your business is, you can't just put a billboard in front of people anymore. You've got to have something of value to them that's going to get them to be like, okay, like this is kind of interesting. And then over time, you just continuously kind of get back in front of them. So I don't think it's different than anything else. But again, I just think that it's a lot harder because they're cutting off your fingers with what you can do. There's just not as many bullets in the chamber for what you can do. Whereas if you were going to come to me with like an e-commerce company that sold sneakers, like we can just open it up and do everything. But it's not the same with cannabis, B2B or B2C.
Ryan, where can people learn more about you and where can they get more information about Webrith?
Yeah, you can go to webrist.org. That's our agency's website. We've got a really good blog. My YouTube channel, post stuff there every week, everything marketing, and Twitter, just at Ryan was here.
Not doing any smoking on your YouTube channel?
Nah, keep it professional.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate you having me.